Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Awaken the World. Today we present church. Well, just kidding. Maybe a little sermon today, a little preachy. Exploring the Bhagavad Gita, selected ancient wisdom that is more than relevant today. And hello, Jennifer. Good to see you again. I hope you enjoyed the meditation this morning. The way I end the meditations, I like to leave people alone in their space, so I don't really stay online for any feedback, but hopefully that was good. And my sweetie says, you are done a little preaching in the past. Well, apparently my sentence structure is definitely better. Did I mention Kelly got A's in English? So before we begin on the Gita, and I love coming back to the Bhagavad Gita again and again and again. It's a beautiful, beautiful text. And I find it kind of funny, and this was a little bit of humor that I had mentioned to Kelly yesterday. I said, they call the Bible the good book. And I figure the reason they do that is it is a good book, but that's all it is. A book like the Gita, this one here, better book. Way better book. This could be called the better book. So if you have a Bible around, that's the good book. This is the better book. And in this book, God is actually composes, it is a love poem. It is a poem of love from God to man, where God explains everything and explains all the pathways and explains all the things you need to do and not do. And none of it's based on judgment. None of it at all. It's all based on cause and effect, karmic action. And we're going to talk more about that. But, speaking of cause and effect and karmic action, we're seeing that in the world today. And, I actually had to deal with this little egoic part of myself yesterday, because Kelly said to me, she says, all the things that you've been talking about for years are coming around to happen. And there's a little tiny part of me that says, good. And there's the vast majority of me that says, well, it's happening, but again, we have choice still. We can still choose to change. And, yesterday was one of those days here where aside from about 1 hour in the morning, we did not see the sun at all. And during that hour, it was simply an orange ball in the sky. It provided virtually no heat yesterday that we were aware of here. The temperatures did not climb above 17 degrees. At the hottest time of day, it was 17 here in town. And usually here, we would expect 32 to 34 degrees at this time. The smoke was so thick that the sky was an orangey red color, and that shifted and changed throughout the day as the smoke increased and then let off. And we have just come by the 4 hottest years on record. Since we as human beings have been recording temperatures, these last 4 years have been the hottest. And what scientists are saying today is we face a minimum of an additional 4 years. And this next 4 years are going to be hotter than ever. We've actually been in a lull. We're coming back into the normal oceanic patterns again that are going to heat things up. And these next 4 years are going to be, quite frankly, ridiculous. All the things that every spiritual leader, every scientist, every prophet that has been speaking about for literally thousands of years is coming manifest now. The warnings are starting to come true. And this is not something to live in fear of. This is not something to panic about. But it is something to be very aware about and something that you can start making plans for right now. Plans involving who do you choose to be as things are shifting and changing. Because really, that is the primary capability that you possess. the ability to respond according to your abilities. Remember that video that was on the group page with that older retired gentleman? And he had spoken about responsibility, your ability to respond based on your abilities. And the more we work on our conscious awareness, the more that we awaken, the more we focus on compassion and healing and caring for each other and this planet, we can find a way at a minimum to relieve some of the suffering that's already starting to take place. You know, we bring on average about 386,000 new babies into the world every day, at the same time that 40,000 babies are starving to death. Now, I'm not talking about all the babies who are malnourished and all the young children and teenagers and adults who don't have proper nutrition. I'm just talking about the fact that 40,000 children die every day under the age of 12 from starvation alone. We really have to question ourselves whether or not it is responsible to continue to bring children into this world as human beings until we have achieved some sort of balance with ourselves and this planet. You see, it is a runaway freight train. And it is highly unlikely at this point that the freight train will be able to be fully stopped before it crunches into the barricade at the bottom of that hill. There is going to be a lot of suffering. How we choose to react to that suffering is going to determine everything. And Kelly says it is quite exciting to think we're here on this earth. And there is a reason for us to be here. And that reason is to bear witness and to also bear the awareness, to hold the space, to keep your vibrational state as high as possible, and don't give in to the system of power and control and fear and guilt and panic that will slowly begin to grip more and more as our situation changes. You know, as I was saying to Kelly this morning, people don't often think about it, but the reality of it is our friend had bought us that small lemon tree we'd shown pictures of. And this lemon tree has almost gone dormant. I don't think it's going to finish producing the lemons. And the reason being is there's not enough sunlight for the last week now, and the temperatures are too low, and the tree is starting to behave like it wants to go to sleep for the winter, because of course in its normal climate, winter time gets down to about 10, 11 degrees at night. So very interesting time we're coming into here. It is an amazing time to be alive, as well as a troubling time to be alive on this planet. You know, someone had said to me, well, why is there more and more people coming into the world? And the reality of it is more and more beings want to be here to watch, want to be here to see what we're going to do this time, to see if we can stop ourselves before we drive ourselves over that cliff. You know, if you've ever been to Head Smashed In Buffalo Jump, or a place similar to that, you know, that cliff that the buffalo were driven off of and would fall to their deaths and be easy pickings, we're kind of going the same way. We're all being driven to the edge of a cliff. And in that coming to the edge of the cliff, if we're panicked and we're afraid, we're going to go right over that edge. And yes, there are and always are awakened beings who come to this earth in human form specifically for the purpose of helping us wake up, of helping us to see a better side of ourselves, to see what more we can be, not this limited form. And when you cease to hold concern, which does not mean not caring for this limited form, but when you cease to hold concern for your limited form and you realize how much more you are, you can then allow yourself to act from that higher place. And in order to get to that higher place, we need to spend some time thinking and working on our own nature, understanding what it is about ourselves, and helping our consciousness rise. And in that, we raise the consciousness of the entire species. So it is a little bit like church, I guess, this morning, you know. If you have a copy of the Bhagavad Gita, we're going to start reading from chapter 3 and verse 30 and 34. And if you have the Bhagavad Gita, the Jack Hawley version, you're going to find that on page 33, I would hope. So basically how I'm going to do this is I'm going to read a little section, and then we're actually going to talk about that section a little bit. So this section is in chapter 3 of the book, and it is entitled Transmuting One's Own Nature, and it starts at sloka 30, or verse 30. Now that you are aware of the indispensable necessity of performing action, I will tell you the best path for you, old friend. And again, this is Krishna speaking to Arjuna. And Arjuna is all of us. Arjuna represents a being, a human being, waking up in this world, beginning to realize there's something more, and confused as to what he's to do now. Because, of course, he sees what's going on around him, and he understands the wrong in it. And yet God says to him, it's okay. Shake off this fever of ignorance that has enveloped you. Break free of your ego. Stop thinking of worldly rewards. Fix your mind in me, the truth, your soul, the divinity within you. Know that it is the divine who propels all actions in the universe. Offer up all your actions to me, divinity. And then, with a perfectly clear mind and heart, go forth, fight this battle of life. There are marvelous benefits from this selfless way of life, Arjuna, but you cannot acquire them without firm faith. These principles must be lived, not intellectualized. Those who earnestly live them are released from their karma, the consequences of their actions. But those who carp about these teachings and do not practice them are deluded and without spiritual discrimination. They are the cause of their own sorrow and ruin. All living creatures, even wise sages, behaves in accordance with their own nature. This is an important point. Everyone's behavior is rooted in the thoughts and the tendencies that predominate them. This is the meaning of one's nature. Therefore, if one's nature is so powerful, one might well question the value of even attempting to live by the scriptural injunctions to do this and don't do that. One could ask, why, if we are but pawns of our nature, should we even try to restrain it? The answer is not to restrain your nature, but to progressively improve your nature. Examine this thing called nature more carefully, more closely. One's own senses are major stumbling blocks to spiritual attainment. Senses derive their power from the many likes and dislikes imprinted in the mind, by family, by culture, and by one's actions in this and previous lives. This deeply embedded, largely unconscious system of likes and dislikes is what gives rise to one's thoughts, desires, and tendencies. This mental pattern is in large part what is meant by one's nature. The best thing to do with these thoughts and desires is to transmute them into a devotional attitude, a desire for God. This is a very important part. When this attitude takes hold, the system of likes and dislikes melts away, which cause the fierce power of the senses to gradually dry up. Desires are enemies when pointed outwards, but allies when pointed inward toward divinity. A really great little passage here. And really what this passage is talking about is it is giving us a guideline. It is saying, fight, live this life. But do not live this life attached to the small sense of self. Do not live your life seeking those desires outside of yourself, always looking outside for some sort of fulfillment. You know, one of the beautiful things I recognized in 2 weeks of fasting was that the desire for a particular food is a habit. You know, I haven't had any Mike hikes in 2 weeks, and I finished fasting yesterday, and I still haven't had any Mike hikes. And the reason I haven't had any is I realize that the desire for Mike hikes, like any other desire, simply becomes an unconscious habit, becomes part of your programming, and you keep going back to it. So I've left the Mike hikes alone. It's been tempting, but no Mike hikes. This is the main core point of this particular section of the book, okay, is that our desires are a function of nature. Our senses, our thoughts, the way we've been raised to think, the way our culture has told us to think, the way we've been programmed in the school systems, all these things are part of nature. And as part of nature, they become part of an unconscious process with us, where we're not even really cognizantly aware anymore from whence the desire arises. We just know we're going to go out and try and fill it. And of course, the problem, you know, if you go up and you look beside the bed and you pull open my little drawer to the nightstand, there's probably 20 empty boxes of Mike hikes in there. You know, I haven't got rid of the boxes yet, and there's a reason for that. When I was looking at those boxes yesterday, I realized that that unconscious desire is never fulfilled. One box today, another box tomorrow, another box the next day, whatever the case may be. But never is there an end to a box where I say, okay, I'm fulfilled now. You always end up coming back to those desires over and over and over again. Why? Ultimately, they don't fulfill. You know, the Mike hikes are a very simple example of an unconscious desire. And our lives are full of unconscious desires, unconscious thoughts, unconscious programming. What is a Mike hike? A Mike hike is like a hot tamale, you know, a little elongated candy, you know, those hot tamale cinnamon ones, except not cinnamon, but any amazing fruit flavors you can imagine. And they just explode with flavor. And sugar, of course. But they're good. But Jennifer, stay away from them. They're highly addictive candies. So, you know, the one of the biggest points in this is that we are not to try and restrain our nature, but to progressively improve our nature. And this is where the whole beating up thing comes in, okay? And that's another very powerful tool that ego uses against itself to stay in control. So you will begin to feel bad about what you've done, that you shouldn't have done it. And that will trigger you to do something else, which you will also feel bad about. And the cycle begins. These things are all part of nature. You know, my natural sweet tooth is the issue. And it's a shame if you don't have Mike hikes, but it's actually probably a good thing. You know, if you ever see Mike and Ike's, just keep walking. Whatever you do, don't touch the box. The second piece I want to read from is from chapter 13, verses 3 to 6. And this talks more about that field of nature. You know, Our egoic selves is a product of nature. There are 7.5 billion beings running around on the planet thinking they're individuals, thinking that there's something particularly special about them. And don't get me wrong, we each have a totally special and unique filter. But in reality, ego and everything happening on this planet is part of nature, part of what the Hindu called in the Bhagavad Gita, Prakriti. And Prakriti is literally the field or the world of nature. Krishna goes on to explain, I will now further explain what the field, the world of nature, Prakriti, consists of, where it came from, and why and how it operates. Then I will tell you more of the knower of the field. Though quite intricate, this is a wondrous inquiry. Down through the ages, the sages have expressed them through chants and aphorisms, the Vedas, carefully balancing their deep love for God with rigorous questioning and understanding, so that these truths would appeal jointly to the head and the heart. First, understand that truly knowing the field, the natural world, is not simply a process of listing the myriad items that comprise it. To understand nature itself, it is necessary to know something about human consciousness. To know something is to be conscious of it. You become conscious of things in the world, that is, you know them, through the mechanisms of perception in your nervous system. Sight, sound, hearing, mind, so forth. But the nervous system is itself a part of nature. That which you use to know the world, nature, is also nature. Thus, that which is known cannot really be separated from the knower of it. Also understand that all of the natural world, all of Prakriti, originates in consciousness itself, the one supreme consciousness. Divinity. In the natural world, supreme consciousness separates into many forces, both physical and mental, endlessly combining and recombining. Everything known or knowable stems from consciousness. Knowing this, one really knows the field of nature, Prakriti. Most importantly, there is the understanding, there are two really important points there. And the first point is that everything is manifest from that one supreme consciousness. There are not a myriad number of beings, even though there appear to be a myriad number of beings. This is all one consciousness experiencing itself, of which we are a glorious part of. To know that field is to understand that everything that's happening with ego, with the thought processes, with your senses, and the sensory input that you take in are all part of that natural field. It's happening with or without your presence, even though you think your presence somehow is important within that body energies field. The presence that we're truly talking about that is important, of course, is that consciousness, is that individuated Atma, that individuated spirit within you. But the mind and everything that has to do with the physical is simply an outpouring of that consciousness, interacting, blending with, and creating our physical world and the life around us. You will never know divinity in any pure form when it's happening at the conscious mind level. It has to be beyond the mind. And it occurs in those deep, deep moments of silence during meditation. You know, Kelly mentioned this to me yesterday. She said, you know, I almost had one of those moments yesterday. I was kind of going into it and I got afraid. And she started thinking, and of course that popped her right back out of it. And the fear is the first time that you drop that sense of self completely. That's that fear that comes out. You'll be in your meditation and you'll know instinctively that something is changing, that things are expanding, that the space is getting larger all of a sudden. And in that moment, you must keep your level of calm and poise and stay focused, because you're literally hovering on the edge. And there's a huge, monumental gift waiting for you just over the edge of that cliff. And if you can stay still in that space, you will enter that space. But the fear that Kelly felt yesterday, that was the fear of ego. The fear of ego wondering what was going to happen to it if it disappeared. And of course the answer is nothing. It's still here, still waiting. And yeah, you don't know where that is going, and where it's actually going is nowhere. You're going to go over the edge into an abyss of nothingness. And it is in that nothingness that you will actually find everything exists. So that sort of delineates nature a little more, you know, and we can use this knowledge in our mind, in our daily mind activities, to become more aware that the behaviors we see around us are natural. They've been programmed. You know, we talked about this yesterday and today. You know, I said to our friend yesterday, we were making some more hypertufa pots, and I said, you know, there is a sense of entitlement there, it seems. Ah, hello, Silver Shells. Nice to see you. And that sense of entitlement is mostly unconscious. It's that same sense that says, well, despite the fact that all the dogs are supposed to be on the leash, my dog can be off its leash. You know, despite the fact that we're not supposed to have campfires this time of year, I can have a campfire. These all happen outside of the conscious mind. Most people aren't consciously making a decision to have a fire in the middle of a forest fire season. What's happening is the unconscious programming is kicked in, and they're not even consciously aware that what they're doing is going to cause a problem or cause harm to someone else, or maybe harm to many someone else's. That doesn't excuse responsibility, but it helps us deal with the idea of blaming people all the time. You know, we live very much in a world of blame where we always want someone to place fault on. And if we were to talk about fault, the entire human race right now would be in a courtroom for what we've done to this planet and to each other. This is not about fault. This is about awareness, raising consciousness, and responsibility. Responsibility for our actions, consciously taken or otherwise, and using that new level of awareness to transmute our actions going further, and thereby bring a benefit to the whole of the species. Yeah, you know, we just talked about campfires. I mean, you know, half of BC's on fire. There's 565 active fires, out of which over 20 of them are massive. We're talking in the tens of thousands of hectares. Okay, the one fire alone covers about 380 square kilometers. Sorry, 78. 380, about 380 square kilometers. So you can imagine the raw size of the fire. And most of the world is burning right now. I mean, if you take away all the water and you take away all the places that don't burn and you look at what's left, half the world is in flames. Realizing why it's happening, and realizing where we're going and what needs to be done are the only things that are going to matter. And it can't be at a government level. This has to happen at us. It has to happen right down to the individual. And I'll say this again, as I've said time and time again, our only hope to avoid the mass suffering and the mass starvation and die-off and disease and sickness that is coming our way is to awaken consciously as a species. The third reading for today is from chapter 17. And in chapter 17, we're going to look at verse 14 to 16. And verse 17 talks about, chapter 17 talks about the path of threefold faith. And in here, we're speaking about spiritual purification, the ways that we purify ourselves to offer the opportunity for more conscious awareness to seep in. Because conscious awareness is really a case of grace. You literally are preparing the vessel, tuning that radio station, that receiver, and getting that dial precisely tuned so that you can hear the messages of love and of guidance that are around us and speaking to us in every way and in every day. And these practices of purification do not have to be harsh. We're going to talk about a few of them. Consider purification, and again, this is Krishna, or tapas, which literally means to melt, as in a refining ore. The purpose of purification is not pain and penance, but to deliberately refine one's life, to melt it down and recast it into higher order of purity and spirituality. The goal is very important. It is not self-punishment, but refinement, to shift from human experience into divinity or divine experience, to be no longer of this earth while still being on this earth, to realize that consciously. There are three main methods of purification. Now pay close attention. The refinement of one's thoughts, words, and deeds. Also called the purification, respectively, of one's instruments of mind, speech, and body. When you modify these three, you automatically change for the better. So what does it mean by purifying your thoughts, purifying your words, purifying your deeds? Well, the first thing is that they all line up. That whatever you're thinking is apparent and manifest in what you are speaking out. And that what you are speaking out is manifest in your actions. Yeah, Christ said exactly the same thing in the good book, remember? But since we're dealing with the better book, we're going to stick with the better book and leave the good book behind for now. So go back to your church, Kelly. Purifying one's deeds. And we could think of these as bodily austerities, okay? Purifying one's deeds consists of four key practices. Veneration of the gods. So whatever deity, whatever you see as God, venerate that. It doesn't matter whether it's the God of a Bible. It doesn't matter whether it's another God or a invisible God or a God that covers everything and is everything. You know, myself, I see God wherever I look. I see God consciousness in everything. So venerate everything. Venerate the gods that you worship. For in fact, it is all only facets of that one divinity. Veneration of holy ones, persons who have so dedicated their careers. So you can venerate and look up to those who have made a lifetime commitment out of raising spiritual awareness, out of growing spiritually and helping others to grow spiritually. The veneration of holy ones, spiritual teachers, gurus, and veneration of the sages who already know Atma, or the spirit within, and have transcended the body-mind. So this is a place we start. We start with respect for the teachings and lessons of those who we venerate, those who we look up to. And we must be very careful that we hold those we look up to under a microscope to make sure that we are actually looking up at that which we should be looking at, because it is never about the individual per se. It's never about the person. It's about the person's thoughts, words, and deeds, and how they line up, and what true benefits you are finding from being in their presence. If you find yourself in the presence of someone and you're hopefully not paying money for this, and you find that their thoughts, words, and deeds, or the feeling you're getting is not communicating to you that they are going to lead you on the right spiritual path, then you want to end that relationship and return within yourself and be aware and be patient. Spiritual teachers always come to those who honestly seek. It's one of those laws of the universe that you can always count on. If you actively seek, if you hold in your heart an inward desire to know that creative essence wholly, to fall so far in love with it and to know it so deeply that you literally become it, you will find the right spiritual teacher for you. And keep in mind, it doesn't have to be one teacher. You will see the messages coming more and more from every facet of your existence. And remember, sometimes the greatest spiritual teacher are the hardest people we have to deal with in our everyday existence. Purifying one's words includes 4 key practices. Truth-telling. Now, truth-telling is a real problem for the human race. You know, case in point, last night, Kelly and I were downstairs, and I've been doing yoga for the last 2 weeks, but I've been leaving the elliptical machine we have downstairs alone because I just haven't had the energy for it. Well, I climbed back on that elliptical last night, and I asked Kelly, I said, well, why did you go over the time that you were supposed to go and thereby kind of mix up the clock and the schedule that we're going on here? Because we both use the equipment on and off. And she started with a whole bunch of lies as to why. When in reality, the truth of it is when I had asked her to make sure she gave me a 1-minute warning so I could finish up my last yoga set and then get myself a drink, she had realized she had already gone over the time. And rather than just own up to it and deal with it, she proceeded to try and convince me that there was 1 minute left, a full minute left now. And of course, when I got on the bike, the time was all messed up. And that's just a simple little example. But this is what we do. We will lie at the drop of a hat to protect some aspect of ourselves. And the aspects we're trying to protect are parts of ego. And when you lie to protect them, you're guaranteeing that your ego stays entrenched deeper and deeper and deeper. You're not on the way to training it away and putting it back in that doghouse when you're lying to yourself or lying to others. you're actually doing so to protect and build your own ego. That's why, number one, truth-telling. The second key practice is not hurting. You know, and we have to be very clear about this, okay? And you know, Kelly had brought this up before, and I just want to make sure that everyone understands. Oh, Sharon made it! Yay! How you doing, Sharon? Good to see you got home safe from Kelowna. Obviously, driving in the smoke bank we've been in. So we're talking about not hurting, okay? And Kelly had brought this up. And oh yeah, happy birthday, Sharon. It's against the law to put candles on your cake. It becomes a fire risk in this fire season. I don't know if we could get a big enough cake, but happy birthday either way. I mean, really. Look at me, Top. I think I'm like, what, 8 candles behind you? Yeah, well, if the smoke's bothering you, don't put the candles on the birthday cake. Whatever you do, leave them out. So we're going to talk about not hurting. And this is the second of the 4 key practices in purifying our speech. Now, what do we mean by not hurting? I do not mean, well, you look nice today to someone and them getting upset because they thought they looked fantastic or they thought they looked like crap and they think you're being facetious about it. We're not talking about people misinterpreting or taking offense at you speaking your truth. What we're talking about is whether you're intentionally or unintentionally using your speech as a weapon to do harm. And I have to admit, I skirt the line on this one. You know, I received a gift, a sword, a commemorative sword from the Dalai Lama, and that sword was for cutting through. It was for my ability to slice right through ego, and in this case, it was actually his ego during a conversation we were having, and I caught him on something. And when we slice through that ego, it is gonna hurt. But my intention that lays behind it is always to free the person from their perceived suffering. And in that, my intention is correct. But still, you must mind that the words do not hurt. And of course, intentionally using words to harm others is something we should avoid altogether. So in purifying our own thoughts, we try our own words, we make sure that we are not intentionally harming others with our words. We do not use words to call other people down. Learn to separate the action and the actioner. Because the actioner isn't a bad person. There are no bad people. There are a lot of good people making really bad mistakes, though, and miserable choices that cause a lot of pain and a lot of suffering. Be mindful with your words. This is a big one, and I see this one and it's rampant. The third key practice to purifying your speech is not flattering. Quit complimenting people. When you compliment someone on their looks or anything they do with their ego, you're helping to reinforce that ego identification. Now, I am not saying when someone does a really wonderful job that it is not totally correct to say, hey, you did a great job. But try to get even the you out of it. Hey, that was a great job. Or a job well done. In that way, we help reduce or at least keep their ego attachment where it's at and not heap additional attachment onto it. You know, especially when it comes to women dressed up prettily. You know, one of the biggest things that women fall into is the ego identification with the way they look. And that has been, but no, I don't mean false complimenting, Kelly. You weren't listening to me. I said complimenting. Period. End of story. Any compliment that builds ego is doing the person a disservice. You are not actually helping them, but you're doing the person long-term damage. You're making it that much more difficult for them to separate from that false attachment as them. And as I said, women especially, you know, you're all dressed up and you are out and about, and you sometimes are fishing for that compliment. If you're a woman, care to comment? I've seen it lots. And I think what it honestly comes from is it comes from a sense that maybe you're not what you think. And when you go out all dressed up, you're looking for others to verify that you are that. I'm not saying that's everyone, but that's a lot of what's going on underneath. There is an idea underneath that we aren't enough somehow. And no clothing, no task you complete, no action you can ever take in this world actually has anything to do with what you are. All of those things belong to that world of Prakriti, that world of nature. You know, you'll never hear me say, wow, do you ever look great? I won't do that. I will say to people, you look very much awake. Or you seem full of energy. But I will not compliment that attaches to ego for them. That's what it means by purifying your speech. The fourth practice, of course, is devotional chanting or reading out loud of Scripture. And when we're talking about Scripture, we are talking about whatever is Scripture to you. So it doesn't matter whether it's the good book or the better book or the best book. And to me, the best book is the it is known as the Guru Granth Sahib. It is the book of the Sufis. And it is a beautiful, amazingly love-filled, wisdom-filled text. If you ever get a chance to get your hands on the Guru Granth Sahib, please do. It's another one of those books you can get a good translation. You're going to love it. Another one, of course, is the book from the Baha'i Faith. And the Baha'i Faith and the Guru Granth Sahib, unlike the Bible, have a verified, unbroken lineage of being passed on from guru to guru to guru, and we historically have marked every single one of them. The books come whole, undamaged by the thoughts of men who would wish to get power and control through altering the book. You want to take this a step further, you know, we're talking about speech. And interesting that a thing that came up here in Canada just yesterday. Most people are unaware that when a bill or a binding document that the government is producing comes into being, that there are changes and corrections done in the background that are not published, not recorded or watched in any way. And this just came to light. Where documents that are being produced, subtle wording is being changed after the fact. And this document doesn't go back for others to reapprove it. These changes are happening after it's already gone through the legislative process, after it's already been approved, and when it's actually getting written up for inclusion into law. Jennifer says you have a bunch of the Baha'i books. Yeah, they're beautiful, aren't they, Jennifer? I mean, I love reading from the Baha'i faith. I have only one close Baha'i friend, and you know, one of the things I love about the Baha'i is they're totally decentralized. There is no leader per se, and their texts are amazing. It's so much poetry, beautiful poetry. Okay. Back to the spiritual purification. So we were on devotional chanting, on the reading out loud. And this is what I'm talking about. Whatever books, whatever videos, whatever podcasts, whatever it is that speaks to you and speaks to your heart, engage yourself with it on a regular basis. The mind is like a wayward puppy dog, prone to running to and fro at the drop of a hat. There's a butterfly and it's off. There's a post to pee on and it's off. That's our minds. The only way to, over time, train the mind to bring it back around is to engage in these spiritual purifications, engage in these practices, and to always bring ourselves back to those things which remind us of the truth of our being, remind us of the truth of our existence. And I can tell there's a lot of people, Kelly included, who have problems with the ideas of not flattering people. They think that flattery is a good thing. And you know, the reality of it is flattery is most often used to get something out of someone. Right? You're looking to sweeten the pot a little bit. We don't want to be doing things that build ego. The state that the world's in today, the state that we're in as a species, has all to do with this false sense of self, this egoic sense of self. Not anymore. Well, you know, if we're all going to hell, we can all carpool. I mean, Sharon's got a nice new car. We can all get in her car and take a ride together, and we'll be so busy having fun with each other and partying that we won't even worry about it. Yeah, and I could tell. And there's more than one person who's going to have problems with the idea of compliments, okay? But flattery truly gets the other person nowhere. It does nothing for them, nothing beneficial. Always tell the truth, Arjuna, and present it in as pleasant a way possible. If you cannot do that, remain silent. If something absolutely needs to be said, you must uphold the truth, but try to find a way to do it that is gentle and obliging. Again, not always the greatest with that, personally. And I'll tell you why. I've come to a point where I understand now that there is precious little time for our species. You know, even when we had Sharon over here yesterday, we were discussing, you know, about the idea of having kids. Not that any of us want to have any more kids, but, you know, her kids may or may not want to have kids. Other people may or may not want to have children. And Sharon brought up a very good point. And that is, given the state of the world, would you want to bring a child in right now? Is it a benefit to bring a child into the world today? Or are you actually serving the whole better by not? And one of the points that was brought up, of course, is that if you do want a family, there are tens of thousands of children out there who would love to be adopted by someone who would love them and care for them. There's no need to create new babies. We're not even looking after the babies we have. Please consider adoption instead. Do not hurt others through harsh words. Words can be more painful than physical violence, and the hurt lasts longer. Words meant to excite negativity are an act of violence. Shun such words. Abstinence from harmful speech is very important. And we've all been there. We've all fallen into that egoic trap. We get angry and we start speaking out words that are designed to hurt, words that are designed to do harm and incite that negativity. Better we stay silent. Better we walk away and come back when we're in a better state of mind. Because it really is all about conscious awakening. And if you make that the goal of every encounter, you will find that no matter what your encounter is actually about, it's going to turn out much better when the goal is always conscious awakening. Back to flattery. Scrupulously avoid flattery, even if what you say is pleasant and contains truth. Promoting vanity does not help spiritual growth. The point is to express only beneficial words that promote movement towards divinity. So, this is what it comes down to. When you're out and about in your daily life, how is it that you can speak to others without engaging in the ego building, the vanity building flattery, and still speak pleasantly, still raise awareness? And I'm going to give you an easy example, honey, okay? So you're outside and you're painting the railings. And we're actually doing that right now. I've been working on the carport floor because it hasn't been looked after in years. We're putting the new coats of epoxy on it and getting it all fixed up and filled in. And Kelly's doing the painting of the spindles. And we were busy at that again this morning, as well as the lawns. And I said to Kelly, the spindles are looking fantastic. That's the difference. I am not saying something positive designed to increase her own sense of self, her ego. I'm not saying, honey, you've done a wonderful job. Because in fact, that which thinks it's Kelly is doing none of the work. Om Tat Sat, divinity, that one consciousness is nature, is manifesting nature. And that work is happening through nature. We, despite what we may think about it, are simply along for the ride. So when I say to you, sweetheart, you have done a wonderful job on those posts, I am talking about you and increasing your ego. But when I say to you, the posts look wonderful, I am making a statement about my opinion of the work that you have completed. Not an opinion about you, but an opinion about the work. And you see, that's actually the truth of it, because it's never the I that's doing the work. We'd all like to believe that. And a lot of us are going to get really upset, but you can't even wash dishes. The ego has no capabilities whatsoever except to talk in your head. And through that talking, it's revealing itself as a type of filter, but that's all it is. It is not the I that washes the dishes. And we've talked about this before. Go ahead, go to the sink and try to talk yourself through consciously washing the dishes. You're going to lose yourself quite quickly, and the dishes will wash themselves. When I wash dishes, I sit behind my eyes observing the dishes being washed. And sometimes, depending on my mood, I may be daydreaming 1,000 miles away. The dishes are looking after themselves. No, you don't actually paint. And you don't actually play the piano. The piano is being played through you, through the filter of you. But it is God who is the grand piano player. No pun intended. Finally, devotional chanting. The regular reading of sacred texts is a purification of speech that can contribute much to spiritual progress. You know, even when I first started waking up, the only thing, well, that's it, exactly, as Sharon says. She was doing that this morning. You're just doing, and before you know, the doing is done, and you're like, where was I in that process? You know, what's really scary is when it happens when we're driving down the highway, and we find out we're someplace, and we go, well, I don't remember driving there, but yet here we are. It's cool, but scary if you're behind a wheel. So we're talking about spiritual texts again, and it is a great spiritual advantage to you, and it helps much in the progress to focus yourself on the spiritual teachings. And it's very simple, garbage in, garbage out when it comes to the mind. So if your mind is tied up with 8 hours of miserable life at work, and you're beating yourself up about work before you even get to work, and you wake up in the morning, and then you're beating yourself up about work when you get home in the evening, or then you're sitting there and you're feeling lost and alone and afraid, or whatever the case may be, and you're just taking it all, you're programming yourself. You're adding garbage into the system that has to come back out of the system again. And there's two ways to get rid of the garbage. One, we have to go in there and we have to mindfully clean it out. And that can be very difficult. It's so much easier to change the garbage and to start putting spirituality in. And then we get spirituality back out. Avoid the garbage. You know, I don't even like to watch a violent movie anymore. And this is coming from a guy who used to kill people for a living. I don't even want to see the violence. Not even in the movies. Because that violence is a type of garbage. It's a type of pollutant that gets into the mind and festers in the mind. What you put into the mind comes back out of the mind. Choose carefully what you put into your mind. Make sure the literature you read, the videos you watch, the music you listen to are all things that are in line with your goals, in line with raising yourself up, not denigrating yourself, not making you feel alone and sad and depressed. Focus on those things which lift you closer to the warmth of our Creator's touch, not things which hide you in the shadows. Stay in that light. Consider now, lastly, this is the last of the verses, the purification of thought, mind austerity. This is more important than word and deed combined. Because good words and deeds are spontaneous in the mind that is saturated with good thoughts. Maintain a calm and gentle state of mind, and you will not be speaking wayward words or doing unwanted deeds. To develop equanimity of mind, allow only good and noble sentiments to rise in you. This may sound impossible, but as we now know, one can indeed cleanse the mind through constant, intense, direct practice. As Buddha says, painful in the beginning, bitter in the beginning, but sweet honey in the end. When you relentlessly practice these acts of purifications of thoughts, word, and deed, with firm faith and no expectation of reward, your practices become sattvic in nature, or they become the purest in nature. You know, we are powerful divine beings, powerful spiritual beings, but those are only words. You have to experience it. And the way to experience it is to take back the control of that sense of you. Take back that ego. Put that dog back in the doghouse, back on the leash, and work on refining and training it. and it will serve you as a loving, loyal companion, which it's meant to be. Again, one just has to take a look outside and around us, a little look at the news, to see that our world is slowly beginning to descend into chaos. You know, at the same time, most of our province is on fire here, and half of the world is in flames. We have Kerala in India, for example, where the monsoon rains and floods are worse than ever, and people are dying. People are dying in the heat wave. People are dying in the smoke. Even right here in Canada, there was half a dozen deaths last week alone from the smoke inhalation. Our planet is responding to what we're doing and the way we're living on her. We are the ones who are creating this intense psychic field of negative energy that is bombarding every single living being and the planet itself. Earthquakes are on the rise. There was another round of earthquakes near Bali yesterday, and Lombok again. They were hit with quite a deep 8+ magnitude, thank God, and a very shallow 3 miles or less 6.7, which did additional significant damage. The so-called economic cost of our climate change is growing exponentially. And it's not that cost we need to be concerned about. It's the cost to ourselves, the cost to humanity, the cost to the future of our children and our grandchildren. And you know, if you love your kids and you love your grandchildren, I would love to believe that you do. But if you're taking any actions in this world that are anything less than trying to wake people up and stop the runaway train we're on, you're not really doing your kids and grandkids any favors. If you can't do it for them, if you can't do it for the love of this planet, and you can't do it for the love of a creator, can you do it for yourself? It doesn't matter what age you are, you know. Again, we talked about this yesterday. Sharon was over. We had a wonderful morning and a great lunch together. And we always love having Sharon over at our place. She's very open, very willing to talk, doesn't hide things, doesn't let her ego get in the way. It's beautiful. You can have great conversation. And one of the things we talked about is, you know, like we're all in our 60s pretty much now. You know, I'm a couple years away. Kelly's a half decade away. Sharon's a little on the other side. And it used to be that we thought, well, you know what? We'll kind of be probably dead before things really begin to get out of control. That's not the case. We're going to see this train hit that wall in our lifetimes with a high degree of likelihood. And if not, we're going to want to come back here. What sort of a world do you want to come back into? You know, you can imagine it like this. There's a reason why achieving a good birth into the right sort of spiritually aware family is so hard. There's not a lot of them out there. There simply isn't. Imagine a different type of world now. Imagine a new earth where we took to heart that we were going to return, and in our own selfishness, we did everything we could to protect, beautify, and act as stewards over this earth so that when we do return, we increase the likelihood that we are going to come in to this earth in a good birth, with a life where our physical, mental, and emotional needs are met, and we can be driven towards and focus on spiritual awakening early in life and achieve that oneness while still alive. Yeah, and that is a point about it. You know, some people, thankfully, as they age, they begin to mellow. they begin to look back on life, and they begin to understand, and they begin to awaken naturally. There's still a lot of sleeping people in their 60s and 70s and 80s who aren't going to awaken in this life. Or if they do, it's going to be just at the moment before death. As I said, imagine that world where we are all living from that higher place, where we are all working towards the understanding that we are coming back time and time again. I hope this has been an interesting little session today. I would encourage you all to get a copy of the Bhagavad Gita, especially Jack Hawley's copy. It has been written specifically for the Western mind. When he says a walkthrough, the walkthrough is really just a couple of chapters before and after, which also flesh out a little more about the story and also speak about his own experiences when he and his wife were there in India at Sathya Sai Baba's ashram, and she became deathly ill out of nowhere. It was the Gita and those words that kept ringing into his heart time and time again. Much love to you all. It's an exciting time to be alive. A scary time for a lot of people. A time where fear is going to grow. Panic can start. You have the choice. You always have the choice to choose how you are going to act. Do not react. You'll notice what reacting is if you look at the world. It is literally redoing an old action. Acting the same way as we always do. Reacting the same way I always do. Choose a new action. Choose a new point of view. And step forward in love and fearlessness and compassion to help those around you, because that is the only thing that will save us as a species. How we treat each other today and every day. Much love. Namaste. Looking forward to seeing you all again very soon. Take care.